Most people never lose their peace in one catastrophic moment. They lose it in seconds. A careless comment, an unanswered message, a disappointment they never expected. And without realizing it, they surrender control. Not to fate, not to enemies, but to emotions that arrive uninvited. There's a space most people never notice. So small it almost disappears. A space between what happens and what you do next. Between being insulted and striking back. Between fear and panic. Between pain and destruction. That hidden space determines the quality of your life. Because a man who reacts to everything does not govern himself. He is governed by circumstances. By moods. By other people. By every storm that enters his day. But history remembers a different kind of person. Men who stayed calm while the world around them collapsed. Marcus Aurelius discovered it while carrying the weight of an empire torn by war and plague. Epictetus discovered it while living as a slave. Seneca discovered it while serving an emperor who would eventually order his death. Different lives, different struggles, yet they all reached the same conclusion. You are not defined by what happens to you. You are defined by the response you choose. And that response lives inside that hidden space. Most people misunderstand Stoicism. They imagine cold men with frozen emotions, pretending not to care. The truth is the opposite. The Stoics felt grief, fear, anger, disappointment. They simply refused to kneel before those emotions. They understood that feelings are visitors. Some deserve attention, others deserve the door. Because here is a truth many people don't want to hear. Anyone who can provoke you can control you. If one insult destroys your mood, your peace belongs to someone else. If failure convinces you to quit, then your future is being ridden by circumstances instead of character. But what if no one possessed that power over you? What if peace wasn't something you discovered? What if it was something you trained? What if strength had nothing to do with money, status, or intimidation? What if the strongest person in the room was simply the one who refused to become someone else because life became difficult? That was the man Marcus Aurelius tried to become. That was the man Epictetus taught his students to become. And that man still exists inside you. Not through motivation, not through slogans, but through wisdom forged by suffering and preserved across centuries. Because somewhere beneath the anxiety, beneath the anger, beneath the noise, there is a calmer version of you waiting to emerge. The question is whether you will find him before the world convinces you to forget him. Here at Sovereign Mindset, that is the mission. To turn ancient wisdom into practical weapons for modern struggles. Because most people are not destroyed by tragedies. They are destroyed by moments. A bad day, a harsh opinion, an unexpected rejection, a message that never arrives. And suddenly their peace disappears. Not because life became unbearable, but because their reaction became stronger than their reason. Think about the last time someone cut you off in traffic. Didn't your body change instantly? Your jaw tightened, your chest heated up, your thoughts became aggressive. For a moment, you weren't making choices. Emotion was driving. Or maybe it wasn't traffic. Maybe it was a message. 10 words. Enough to ruin an entire evening. You replayed them endlessly. Should I reply? Did they mean that? Why would they say this? Hours passed. Meanwhile, they had probably forgotten about it minutes later. Yet you carried the burden inside your chest. That's not weakness. That's biology. Deep inside your brain sits an ancient survival system designed to protect you. For thousands of years it kept human beings alive. The problem is that it cannot tell the difference between a predator and criticism. An angry email feels like danger. A rude comment feels like an attack. And before wisdom speaks, emotion rushes to the front. That's the trap. Something happens. You react. Someone insults you. You react. You fail. You react. Soon your mood becomes controlled by everything outside yourself. The Stoics had a word for this. Slavery. Not slavery to another man. Slavery to impulse. Slavery to anger. Slavery to fear. Because if every event controls your emotions, then you are no longer directing your life. Other people are. Their opinions shape your confidence. Their behavior determines your peace. Their chaos becomes your chaos. You become a mirror reflecting the world instead of a force shaping your own destiny. The Stoics refused to live that way. They believed freedom existed in the pause, a hidden doorway between event and action, a place where wisdom finally gets a voice. And if you learn to enter that space, everything changes. Not the world, not other people, you. And that is where real power begins. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than most men who have ever lived. Imagine him in the year 170 AD. Plague spreading, wars raging, enemies plotting, an empire struggling to survive. And at the center stood the most powerful man alive. Yet almost every night, Marcus sat alone writing reminders to himself. Not speeches, not laws, private notes, warnings meant to keep his own mind from turning against him. Think about that. The ruler of Rome feared losing control over himself more than he feared losing control over nations. And one lesson survived nearly 2,000 years. You have power over your mind, not over events. That is where strength begins. Not in controlling life, but in governing yourself. Marcus buried children. He faced betrayal. He watched his empire suffer. Still, he returned to one discipline. Pause, observe, respond. Never surrender the throne of your mind to emotion. He wasn't perfect. He struggled. He worried. He grieved. But he trained. Day after day. Just as soldiers strengthen the body, Marcus strengthened the mind. And eventually that practice created something extraordinary. Not a man without emotions, but a man who refused to become their servant. And perhaps that is the greatest victory any human being can achieve. Not conquering nations, not defeating enemies, but mastering himself. And once you understand that, you begin to realize something unsettling. Your greatest battle was never outside. It has always been inside. Long before Marcus Aurelius wore a crown, another man discovered the same truth while possessing almost nothing. No wealth, no title, no freedom. His name was Epictetus, and his story destroys one excuse after another. He entered this world as a slave. His body belonged to another man. His choices were limited, his future uncertain. Most people believe freedom comes from circumstances. Epictetus proved otherwise. According to one famous story, his master began twisting his leg in an attempt to break his spirit. Calmly, Epictetus warned him. "You will break it," the man continued. Eventually, the bone snapped. And Epictetus simply replied, "I told you." Whether every detail happened exactly that way matters less than what the story reveals. His body could be harmed, but his mind remained unconquered. And that was the lesson he spent the rest of his life teaching. Your possessions are not you. Your reputation is not you. Other people's opinions are not you. Even your circumstances are not truly you. The only thing that belongs completely to you is your judgment. The meaning you assign, the interpretation you create, that is your kingdom. And once you understand this, life changes. Because insults lose some of their poison. Rejection loses some of its power. Failure stops looking like the end. Epictetus repeated one truth constantly. People are disturbed less by events and more by the meaning they attach to them. Think about that. Someone ignores your message. Immediately your mind says, "They don't respect me." Someone criticizes your work. Suddenly the story becomes, "I'm not enough." The event lasted seconds, but the story can create suffering that lasts years. And that suffering was never created by reality. It was created by interpretation. Which means interpretation can also set you free. That is why Epictetus gave his students one question. Is this within my control? Or is it not? If it isn't, release it. If it is, focus on it. Simple words. Difficult life. Because human beings love chasing things they cannot command. Approval, recognition, the past, other people's behavior. And when reality refuses to obey, they suffer. Epictetus taught something radical. Protect your energy. Guard your mind. Stop trying to govern what was never yours. But philosophy sounds beautiful until emotions arrive. Until anger burns. Until fear tightens your chest. Until pride gets wounded. That's when wisdom becomes difficult. And that is why the Stoics trained daily. Not when life was calm. Not when everything felt easy. every day, because soldiers don't wait for war to prepare, and wise men don't wait for suffering before strengthening the mind. That lesson became clear in the life of Seneca. Unlike Epictetus, Seneca had everything: money, influence, status, power. From the outside, his life seemed perfect. But Seneca understood something terrifying. Everything can disappear: health, relationships, success, reputation. Life can change faster than pride is willing to admit. So instead of pretending disaster would never come, he prepared for it. Every morning he imagined losing comfort. He imagined exile, poverty, illness, even death itself. Not because he was hopeless. Because he wanted to become ready. He practiced what the Stoics called premeditation of adversity. A strange idea in modern times, but a powerful one. Because people are often broken by surprise more than pain. Expect life to be perfect and every disappointment becomes a betrayal. Expect challenges and difficulties become part of the journey. Seneca understood that rehearsing hardship weakens its ability to terrify you. He once wrote that a man who anticipates trouble steals much of its power. How much suffering comes from refusing to believe life can be difficult? How many people suffer twice? First in imagination, then in reality. The Stoics wanted to end that second suffering. Expect setbacks. Expect criticism. Expect disappointments. Not because life is cruel. Because life is life. And eventually Seneca would need every lesson he practiced. The Emperor Nero, the very man he advised, turned against him. Soldiers arrived with a death sentence. Everything he built was over. Most men would have collapsed. But witnesses describe something remarkable. Seneca remained composed. He comforted his friends. He strengthened his family. And he faced death with dignity. Because calm is not discovered during crisis. It is built long before crisis arrives. That is what united Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca. 3 different men. 3 different destinies. One identical lesson. Train before the storm. Because when emotions explode, training speaks louder than intention. And perhaps that is the secret most people overlook. You do not rise to the level of your feelings. You fall to the level of your preparation. So how do you actually train yourself? The answer begins with something deceptively simple. Pause. That tiny delay changes everything. When anger rises, pause. When pride feels attacked, pause. Before sending that message, pause. Before defending yourself, pause. Because your first impulse is rarely wisdom. It is habit, fear, ego, conditioning. Freedom lives inside the pause. At first, it feels unnatural. You've spent years reacting automatically. But with practice, something remarkable happens. The gap begins to grow. 1 second becomes 3, 3 becomes 10, and suddenly you discover something powerful. You have choices. You don't need to answer every insult. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone. You can observe. You can think. And then you can choose. That is where sovereignty begins. And that's where most people lose control. Not because life defeated them, but because they never learned to stop long enough to hear wisdom speak. If this journey is strengthening something inside you, stay with sovereign mindset. Because mastering the world was never the mission. Mastering yourself is. Marcus Aurelius understood something most people spend their entire lives missing. Events are rarely what break us. Our judgments do. An insult is an event. Deciding that it proves you're worthless is a judgment. Rejection is an event. Believing it means you'll never be loved is a judgment. Failure is an event. Convincing yourself that your story is over is a judgment. And judgments can be questioned. That realization changes everything. Because not every thought deserves your trust. Not every emotion deserves obedience. The mind speaks constantly, but wisdom begins when you stop treating every thought as truth. Ask yourself, is this thought accurate? Is it useful? Is it within my control? If the answer is no, let it pass. Not every cloud deserves a storm. The Stoics understood that the mind resembles a garden. Whatever you feed becomes stronger. Water resentment and bitterness grows. Feed fear and eventually fear becomes your identity. Nurture gratitude and your perspective changes. Strengthen patience and your reactions soften. Develop discipline and chaos loses its grip. Little by little, you become the person you repeatedly practice being. Not through miracles, not overnight, through repetition. Marcus wrote daily. Seneca reflected each evening. Epictetus challenged every impression that entered his mind. Because character isn't built in dramatic moments. It's built quietly. In ordinary choices nobody applauds. The angry message you decide not to send. The criticism you refuse to carry all day. The failure you choose to learn from instead of surrender to. Those moments seem insignificant, but destiny hides inside small decisions. Every reaction strengthens an old version of you. Every response creates a new one. So ask yourself honestly, who are you training? Because this battle has never really been about anger, or stress, or emotional control. It's about identity. Thousands of tiny choices eventually become a man. And each reaction either gives away freedom or protects it. Think about how often strangers influence your emotions. A negative comment steals your confidence. One difficult day steals your motivation. Someone else's bad mood becomes your burden. Without realizing it, you hand over authorship of your life. The world begins writing your story for you. But every time you pause, breathe, and respond deliberately, something changes. You reclaim the pen. You become the author again. That is why Marcus Aurelius is remembered. Not because he never felt anger, but because anger never ruled him. That is why Epictetus remains immortal. Not because his life was easy, but because even chains couldn't conquer his mind. And Seneca is remembered not because he escaped death, but because he faced death without surrendering his dignity. 3 men, 3 lives, 1 lesson. Freedom begins inside, not outside. Inside the moment where emotion demands control and wisdom quietly asks for patience. Inside the moment where you refuse to become ugly simply because someone else already has. That invisible gap we spoke about at the beginning. That small space between what happens and what you choose. That is your freedom. No enemy can steal it. No betrayal can destroy it. No government can confiscate it. Only you can surrender it. And most people do. Every day. Trading peace for approval. Trading confidence for validation. Trading identity for acceptance. The Stoics refused. And that refusal made them unforgettable. Because they understood something eternal. You cannot always command circumstances. But you can command the spirit with which you face them. That is real power. Not wealth. Not muscles. Not titles. Not applause. Real strength is remaining yourself when the world pressures you to become someone else. And perhaps no victory is greater. Not conquering cities. Not defeating rivals. But ruling the kingdom within. Because once a man learns to govern himself, something unusual happens. He becomes difficult to manipulate. Difficult to intimidate. Difficult to break. He becomes dangerous to chaos. Dangerous to fear. Dangerous to anything that requires his emotional slavery. He becomes free, not partially, not temporarily, deeply, and freedom like that cannot be purchased. It must be earned, one response at a time, one thought at a time, one difficult moment at a time. So here is the challenge. The next time life tries to provoke you, pause. Before anger speaks, pause. Before fear decides, pause. Ask yourself one question. Is this mine to control? If not, release it. If yes, answer with wisdom. Not because it feels easy, but because every time you do, you strengthen the man you're becoming. Imagine how different your life would look if you mastered only this skill. How many regrets would disappear? How many arguments would never happen? How much anxiety would lose its grip? Most people spend their lives trying to control everything around them. The Stoics spent their lives learning to control themselves. And that is why they became unshakable. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the quality of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Because thoughts become beliefs. Beliefs become actions. Actions become habits. And habits become destiny. Which means your destiny is being shaped right now. Not next year. Not someday. Now. The next disappointment. The next insult. The next failure. Those moments are not interruptions. They are the training. Every difficult person teaches patience. Every setback teaches resilience. Every painful season asks one question. Who will you become because of this? Marcus answered. Epictetus answered. Seneca answered. Now the question belongs to you. Years from now, you may barely recognize the person you are today. Not because life became easier, but because you became stronger, calmer, wiser, and perhaps you'll finally realize that freedom was never somewhere outside you. It was hidden in that tiny space between stimulus and response all along. If something in this message spoke to you, stay close to sovereign mindset. Because this journey isn't about escaping struggle. It's about becoming the kind of man struggle cannot destroy. And I want to leave you with one question. When life tests you again, and it will emotion choose for you? Or will you?